Number 1. Ravenwood Apartment. In the bustling city of New Haven, an unprecedented virus outbreak led to a sudden lockdown. Among the residents of the old, sprawling Ravenwood Apartments were Sarah, a single mother, Jake, a struggling artist, and Mr. Thompson, a retired detective. On the first night of the lockdown, strange things began to happen. Sarah heard whispers through the walls. Jake noticed his paintings were being altered overnight, and Mr. Thompson felt something was terribly wrong. Sarah's young daughter Emily claimed to see a shadow man in their apartment. Initially dismissed as a child's imagination, the whispers grew louder, and objects began moving on their own. Thompson decided to investigate. He gathered Sarah and Jake, and they discovered that in the 1930s a series of gruesome murders had taken place in the building, and the killer was never caught. The haunting grew more intense. Sarah found Emily talking to the shadow man, who told her they could never leave. Jake's paintings now depicted the murders in horrifying detail, and Mr. Thompson found a hidden room filled with old, blood-stained clothes and personal items of the victims. The residents tried to leave, but the building seemed to have a life of its own. Doors wouldn't open, windows were sealed shut, and the whispers turned into terrifying screams. Desperate, the trio decided to confront the spirit. They performed a séance, hoping to communicate and put it to rest. The spirit revealed itself, a dark, menacing figure filled with rage and sorrow. Using Mr. Thompson's detective skills, they discovered that the killer had been wrongly accused and murdered by a vigilante mob. With this revelation, they performed a ritual to release the spirit, acknowledging its suffering and wrongful death. With the spirit finally at peace, the haunting ceased and the lockdown was lifted. The residents of Ravenwood Apartments were free, but they would never forget the terror they endured. Sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, and the dead demand justice. Number 2, Briarwood Sanitarium. In the small, isolated town of Black Hollow, a chilling legend surrounded an abandoned asylum on the outskirts. The asylum, known as Briarwood Sanitarium, was once a place for the mentally ill, but had been shut down in the 1950s after a series of gruesome and inexplicable deaths. Among them were 4 friends: Mark, Lisa, Tom, and Rachel. Bored and restless, they decided to explore the notorious Briarwood Sanitarium, seeking thrills and distraction from the lockdown. As night fell, they made their way to the decaying building, its windows shattered and walls covered in ivy. The air inside was thick with the smell of mold and decay. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, they ventured deeper into the asylum, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. They discovered old patient records depicting horrific treatments and experiments. Echoes of screams seemed to linger in the hallways. Mark found a journal belonging to Dr. Aldridge, the head physician who was rumored to have conducted inhumane experiments on the patients. As they read the journal, the air grew colder and a sense of dread filled the room. Dr. Aldridge had attempted to cure madness by isolating and torturing patients, believing he could drive out their demons. His methods were brutal, and many patients died in agony. It was said that their spirits never left. Suddenly the door slammed shut, and their flashlights flickered. Whispers filled the air, and shadowy figures appeared resembling tortured patients. The friends tried to leave, but found the asylum had twisted into a labyrinth. Every turn led them deeper into the building. Lisa was the first to disappear, dragged into the darkness by unseen hands. The others heard her screams echo through the halls. Panicked, they ran, but one by one they were separated and taken. Mark felt cold hands grip his ankles, pulling him into a room where the walls seemed to bleed. Tom and Rachel found themselves in the treatment room where the rusted tools of torture still lay. The ghostly figure of Dr. Aldridge appeared, his eyes hollow and filled with malice. He began to reenact his twisted experiments on them, their screams blending with those of the past victims. Rachel managed to break free, finding herself in the main hall. She ran towards the exit, but the spirits of the patients blocked her path, their faces twisted in eternal agony. They whispered for justice, their hands reaching out, cold and relentless. Rachel was the last to vanish, her scream piercing the night. Days later, when the lockdown was lifted, the townsfolk found no trace of the four friends. The legend of Briarwood Sanitarium grew darker, warning all who dared to enter. Black Hollow remained haunted by the unsolved mystery of the missing friends. And it was said on quiet nights the screams of Mark, Lisa, Tom and Rachel could still be heard, a chilling testament to the terror they faced.